Hello, everyone. I'm Henri Makembe, CEO of Two Big Things, and welcome to Two Big Talks, where we discuss the trends and latest news in the ever-evolving world of digital technology. On today's episode, we're talking about how to engage Latinx voters this cycle with our very own Catherine. To get started, Catherine, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Hey, Henry. My name is Catherine Algeri. I am the Senior VP of Digital Engagement at Do Big Things. I have been working directly on political campaigns for, over a decade now. And prior to that, I came from the nonprofit space. I did digital for Richard Blumenthal's first Senate campaign, helped Sheldon Whitehouse with his reelect and getting his official stuff up and going, and then did Michelle Nunn's digital campaign in Georgia in 2014, which broke records at the time for digital fundraising before moving over to the DSCC, where I was the first Latinxer to head up digital for a major Democratic Party committee. And then the cycle after that, after 2016 and 2018, I served as senior digital advisor for Kamala Harris's presidential campaign. So had some exciting opportunities.
Yeah, quite the resume here. And I know I don't speak just for myself to say that we're very, very, very excited to have you as part of the team and very excited to see what you can bring with our clients this cycle.
Thank you. It's really also just a pleasure to be on a team that is like 50%, people of color too. I think it really changes the environment and the work, and such a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in. We're going to be talking about Latinx voters this cycle. Let's start with the obvious question. Why is engaging Latinx voters very important this cycle?
Well, I'll start off with the very accurate number of, there have probably been 1 million think pieces, right? Just, casual million about, right, like why Latinx voters are the key for the Democratic Party, and oh my gosh, I can't believe we lost ground last cycle. How did this happen? And there is truth to the fact that that Trump and the GOP did make some gains with Latinx voters last cycle. And I think that there is a lot of opportunity for us to drill down on that. But the truth is, if we let those gains continue without actually really re-examining what we're doing and making some structural changes, it would be very difficult for us to continue to hold the House and Senate in this upcoming election.
That's fair, and I couldn't agree more. And I think it's you've mentioned 1 billion of pieces and think pieces on the subject, and yet, candidly, we're still seeing some candidates struggle with that. We're still seeing some campaigns struggle with that. So even with those think pieces out there, why do you think it's so hard for candidates to engage with Latinx voters?
I think the number one issue with that is the perception of the Latinx community as a monolith. And I say this as a member of a community where, we can't even agree on a name as a group, right? So there's Latine, Latinx was originally designed to be more inclusive of the LGBTQI plus community, but, for many is seen as the language of the oppressor, right? Rather than Latine, which flows more with the language, and then Hispanic. So there are a lot of different opinions on even what to call ourselves. But I think one of the things that folks don't understand when they're like, we got to get the Latino vote, is how closely people associate with their specific diasporas. And what I mean by that is, I have, El Salvadorian heritage, and my expression of my culture and my traditions can be very different from, a friend of mine whose family is from Honduras. Even in my extended family, we have, folks who have, Mexican American heritage from Texas who don't view themselves as Latino first, right? They view themselves as American first, and it's a multi-generational thing. But I think that if we start to dive a little bit into the diasporas and connect to the diasporas, we create specific advertising for them. We look at the type of changes in dialects and slang that we use to talk to these communities to be viewed as authentic. And I think that right now, the parties and the campaigns are not structured to really dive into those specific diasporas, and they want kind of like a blanket universal approach. And that isn't going to be the fit that we need to really make progress.
Yeah, I love that you bring that point, and I think it's so funny that even with the proliferation of digital, folks are still trying to have a one-size-fit-all message for all these, you know, distinct communities. And I think we hope to see different this cycle, but it's very interesting that you bring it up. So I think just deep diving in a little bit in that, what do you think are going to be some of the hurdles? Like, right, we see that campaigns are it's hard for them, but on the flip side, what makes it so hard for them to do that?
Yeah, I think that one, we're going to need to put more resources into how we think about organizing for the Latinx community. I think right now you see a lot of campaigns, they're like, well, we have our bucket of organizers for women, we have our, bucket of organizers for LGBTQI plus community. And then they think that they can just have a bucket for Latinx. And it's sort of like, we need to actually open that up a little bit more, right? Like if you're in Texas, like, there was a article about how like, okay, yeah, Trump lost the Hispanic vote in Texas, but he won the Tejano vote, you know? Um, and sort of like, well, who are the different pockets of diasporic identities in the state where I'm running? And who is going to be my point person for that? And who's going to make sure that I'm not using the wrong terminology to address this group and have people dismiss my message right out of hand? So I think the organizing is a key part of that. And then I also think, you're really going to need to, frankly, have some folks diversify their teams at the table, right? Because you can't just be using Google Translate for this stuff. I like to provide people with this example because it's sort of, it's a respected corporation from a money making perspective. Like sometimes I'll be in line at McDonald's and they'll be like the product they're trying to sell and some language for it in English, right? And then if you look at the same it's the same product, but the language for it in Spanish is not a direct translation at all because the marketers understood that like this slang that's working with this specific demographic is not going to go over well in Spanish at all. So like they've evolved on that level, and I think that you can't really do that without more diverse folks in the room. And I think that's an area where we can really see folks improve as one pocket of that. I would also say I would love to see folks focus more on the misinformation that we are seeing so heavily target Latinx communities, and that research has found to be sadly pretty effective.
That's interesting. Let's dive in a little bit into misinformation, and I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, it's everywhere, and through some of our work at DBT, we found that Latinx population have been targeted, but that it's also coming from abroad in terms of different countries. So, what are the things that some of the campaigns can do to educate voters around that and fight back and push back on that?
Yeah, this might be an unpopular viewpoint, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think that a lot of times on the campaign trail, people don't want to refute the other side, right? It's something that we all learned. If you did debate in high school, Oxford debate, Lincoln Douglas debate, that you should refute every point. But when it comes to politics, we've kind of been taught like, don't engage, you're letting the other person set the agenda. And I think we need to re-examine that when it comes to misinformation that's like targeting the Latinx community. We know that overall, while not a monolith, the Latinx community is much more likely to receive their news and their content via their mobile devices. We know that YouTube is extremely popular in this demographic. And I have seen some amazing YouTube videos with fantastic animation quality coming out of the right that start off in sort of a neutral place and then would come to the conclusion of where you really want to be is with Trump. And I haven't seen that level of advertising focus on the Latinx community. So I'd like to see us sometimes engage more with the misinformation. And I think, I'm sure we'll talk later about examples, but I was really impressed with the COVID efforts coming out of Maryland, COVID vaccination efforts. They were one of the first states to reach, I believe, over 50% vaccination rates with the Latinx community. And they had a very targeted campaign for that purpose, both with their online and radio advertising, but on their in-the-person communication in the communities.
Since you mention it, what have you seen people done well? I think it's good to say, hey, we need to see more of that. But what have you seen in the political and advocacy space? You just mentioned Maryland here. Is there anything else that you've seen folks are doing well in terms of engaging Latinx voter, in terms of producing content that will move that voting block, even if it's not one single monolith voting block?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that one thing that was effective, and granted, the Trump administration made it as difficult as possible, but I do think that in the census outreach efforts, we really saw people transition more to audio-based platforms to reach that specific audience, and I think that there is a lot of potential in that. I would love to see more folks doing things with YouTube, but I do think that was a bright spot in the last couple of years.
Awesome. And then one last thing, what do you think is one thing that you want to see a campaign doing that is innovative in terms of reaching out to the Latinx population?
Oh my gosh. This probably would have to happen at the presidential level in terms of the budget, but I would love to see an exploration of animation-based content. So many folks are on YouTube and using it as entertainment, and you lose so many people in the first 8 seconds or first 3 seconds of a video, right? I don't think they're as likely to stick around for a sincere direct-to-camera message as they are something that is going to entertain them. And taking that sort of how can we entertain folks lens with the information to help reach people, I think would be phenomenal.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And we can end on that note. Catherine, thank you so much for both the hot take and what you like to see done this cycle. Really appreciate you taking us to that conversation. Everyone else, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Do Big Talks. If you have topics you'd like us to discuss, please give us a shout out and stay tuned for a future episode. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.